Congratulations, Krystal. Hello, everyone. I am Rosamond S. King, and I am so happy that technology allows me to be present at this launch to big up Krystal and this book and be part of the celebration. I can't remember exactly when I met Krystal, but I do know that it was when she was a student at UWI at the illustrious Institute of Gender and Development Studies. I do, however, remember the first time we bounced up on each other in a queer space. It was in that bar that shall remain nameless that you had to walk up the stairs. It was on a second or third floor. And I remember it because I was a bit uncomfortable drinking and whining around a graduate student. But as many of you know, at that time, there were a relatively small number of people who were open about being a sexual minority in Port of Spain. And there was an even smaller number of spaces where we could socialize. So that meant that no boundaries were strictly or easily upheld. So we socialized together, we talked about academic and intellectual thoughts together as well, and it was a pleasure to get to know Krystal. The flexibility of boundaries, or boundaries that go in and out of focus, is also a theme in Erotic Cartographies. Krystal does a great job of situating herself in relationship to the material, and more importantly, to the people and the community that she is studying. In that way, I find the book very honest and even in some moments quite vulnerable. Anyone who knows me knows that I do not base my research on interviews on purpose, because people, unlike books, do not show up on time, change their mind about what they have to say or what they believe, and are liable to judge you and strips you up and down. It's really a serious thing dealing with real live people, and it's a big responsibility. So the fact that Krystal is a part of the community that she is researching enabled her a great deal of the insight that appears in this book. And I applaud you, Krystal, for the care with which you treat our communities. The metaphor of flexible, porous boundaries also applies to the functionality of erotic cartographies. It is absolutely a peer-reviewed, scholarly book with the appropriate citations and theories, all protocols duly observed. And it's actually quite a good read for academics and non-academics alike interested in Caribbean sexual minorities, especially women who love women, and of course, especially in Trinidad. As you read the book, you become invested in the woman. You want to see their maps, their erotic cartographies. And this is a book that has a number of pictures in it of images of the actual maps, and that's a lot of fun. And you also want to understand what Krystal sees in between the lines of their images. Almost 10 years ago, I published a book called Island Bodies, Transgressive Sexualities in the Caribbean Imagination. And at that time, you could count on one hand the number of academic books focused on the lives of Caribbean women who love women. I cannot tell you how pleased I am to see this body of work so rapidly expanding, and in particular to see Erotic Cartographies and its contribution to the field. This is the kind of book that I dreamed about reading when I was writing Island Bodies. So, what is the book about? In Krystal's own words, quote, Erotic Cartographies centers the woman's own discursive articulations of selfhood and space, focusing on how these women come to perceive what is real and known about their world through their unique intersectional standpoint. And of course, those unique standpoints are being woman, living in Trinidad, and this woman, she brings in women of different races and ethnicities as well. To put it simply, there is no book like this, with its unique combination of insight into Trinidadian woman who loves woman, arrived at using the concept and methodology of mapping. This combination is really fresh, and it draws you in to see them again, what the maps the woman drew look like and what obvious and hidden meanings the maps contain. She calls this subjective mapping. And of course, subjective meaning Whoever gets to make the maps helps to decide what they mean and what gets included in them. And as Krystal points out, we, meaning Caribbean people, women who love women who are not white, we often do not get to make the maps that are set out to define our lives and the spaces in them. So it's incredibly important that she has encouraged women to create maps of whatever space they wanted in whatever way they wanted. And again, if you look at the maps, the images are really different. The materials that they use to draw them are different, and they're not traditional maps. So it's very engaging. Using maps is also significant because it is a different way to come at understandings of the world. The visual engages a different part of our brain and can therefore reveal somewhat differently nuanced information than verbal answers alone to questions. The maps in Krystal's book are also important because they focus on self-determination, again, that subjectivity, not on what some of us call the trauma porn of the stereotype of Caribbean homophobia, and also not on pure celebration. The respondents answered Krystal's questions by drawing their own maps, and those maps and stories give us a true range of human experience, as well as the range of experiences of Trinidadian women who love women. Many of you present tonight know that when you tell people you study sexuality, they think you study sex, and sometimes their eyes get big. But the truth, of course, is much more complex. And drawing on Audre Lorde and other theorists, as she says in her title, Krystal is focused on the erotic, an expansive notion that includes but goes beyond sex. To quote the book, quote, "Understanding oneself as erotic means knowing and experiencing one's sexuality, spirituality, and entanglements," I love that word, entanglements, "entanglements in webs of power, termed erotic subjectivity," end quote. Krystal goes on to write that the erotic is both a state of consciousness and a type of practice, way of being in the world. To quote again from the book, she writes that the erotic, quote, "encompasses an awareness of the body, the mind, and the spirit as connected. To really experience the erotic is to possess a certain knowledge of the self," end quote. Think about that. The erotic as knowledge of the self. You will learn a lot about women who love women in this book. And as you're reading, you might learn something about yourself as well. The maps in Krystal's Erotic Cartographies and her analyses of them show us places we might not otherwise have access to. By focusing on place, I hope that this book, combined with the work of Gloria Wecker, Audre Lorde, and so many other scholars that she cites, once and for all eliminates the notion that Caribbean women who love or have sex with other women do not exist or are so invisible and hard to find that our lives cannot be sources of knowledge. This is especially remarkable because you know how Trinitas give directions, right? Oh, you want to go there? Well, you go down the road and then you go so, and then you go so, and when you see the red house, that is not it. Yet it goes past that, and then you go so, and you go so, and you reach. So despite the fact that Krystal is a Trini, don't mind she the diaspora now, the maps of Krystal's interviewees and the larger map of the book itself give us excellent directions into the minds and lived experiences of women who love and have sex with other women in Trinidad. And of course, actually, the word "so" is also appropriate in this context, since sometimes it's used by Caribbean people to describe non-heteronormative folks, right? As in, I think she's so. If you read the acknowledgements of this book, and you should always read the acknowledgements, they are more about community, about family and what I like to call framily, friends and comrades, than it is a list of hierarchical relationships. And that is also what I think this gathering is about this evening, bringing the massive together who support Krystal and her work and launching this book into the world to add much needed knowledge and analysis. I brought Krystal into one of my classes to teach my students and me about the subjectivity of mapping. She was a wonderful teacher and taught us about how we can use our own agency to create our own maps. And ever since then, I have been incorporating mapping assignments into my courses. So if you are a teacher or professor and you want to learn about subjective mapping from an expert, of course, you should read Erotic Cartographies. And then on top of that, you should invite Krystal to give a demonstration to your class. One of the last quotes I want to read from the book is about the importance of maps. She writes, quote, "Maps are images that combine vision, experience, and imagination." As a poet, as well as a critic and a human being who feels like I have to imagine that a better world is possible, I believe that imagination is invaluable as a tool, as a method, in and of itself. And of course, in this context, if we're going to talk about imagination, we have to invoke the late but forever director of imagination for CAISO, Colin Robinson. And Krystal has nods to Colin in the book as well. So now I want you to take a moment, and if you have something to write with in front of you, and a piece of paper or a napkin, that's great. If not, you don't need to get up. You can just do it in your mind with your eyes closed. And I want you to draw a map of a place that you feel safe. If you haven't read the book yet, this is one of the key prompts that Krystal gives to the woman whom she interviews. So again, I just want you to take a moment. And if you have a napkin, a piece of paper, you can draw it. If not, you can close your eyes. And I want to imagine a space that you feel safe. I hope that all of us have more than one place where we feel safe. And I know that for me, this gathering of these friends and family this evening, gathered by people connected to Krystal, is one of the places where I feel safe, where I feel welcome to come in and find my people. My last quote from the book, Krystal writes, quote, "Wherever we are is a space of survival." Thank you, Krystal, for Erotic Cartographies, and congratulations again on the launch of your first book. Good night.